In Port Charles, the tides of power and emotion never rest, and this week, a new current begins to swell, one marked by suspicion, shifting allegiances, and the threat of truths long buried clawing their way to the surface. For those at the heart of the storm, the consequences of a single conversation, a quiet observation, or an unexpected revelation may alter everything they thought they understood. From Carly's unsettled instincts to Marco's disturbing discovery, each thread is drawing tighter in a web that no one saw forming until it was already too late. It began with a private exchange between Sonny and Carly. To any outsider, their words might have seemed casual, even warm, but for Carly, something about Sonny's demeanor struck an uneasy chord. He wasn't as present as he should have been, and his words carried a weight she couldn't define. He spoke of safety and family, yes, but threaded through the conversation was a subtext that made Carly's stomach tighten. There was a foreboding calm in Sonny's voice, as if he were preparing her for something he couldn't bring himself to say directly. His cryptic concern about the people closest to them, and his subtle hints that changes might be coming, left Carly spiraling. She'd known Sonny long enough to recognize when he was shielding her from something, only this time, she feared the truth might be worse than whatever he was trying to hide. At the same time, Jason, always silent and observant, found himself in an unexpectedly deep conversation with Dante. While the two had worked together before and maintained a level of professional respect, this moment was different. Jason, in his typical restrained way, offered Dante a glimpse into his own view of justice, loyalty, and the burden of being pulled between family and duty. For Dante, who had been wrestling with the weight of recent choices, particularly concerning his growing tension with his son Gio, Jason's words reframed the situation. Jason didn't offer answers, but he gave Dante permission to acknowledge that some battles weren't meant to be fought with fists or law, but with clarity, grace, and distance. It was the type of perspective Dante rarely allowed himself, especially now that he was no longer certain where he stood in the tangled mess of alliances between the Corinthos family, the police, and his own fractured household. Elsewhere in Port Charles, Lulu, who had spent months quietly regaining her place in the world, found herself watching Lucas with growing concern. Lucas had been adrift since returning to town, seemingly strong on the outside, but emotionally frayed beneath his confident smile. He had been taking on too much, hiding too many of his own doubts about who he had become and where he belonged. Lulu, no stranger to second chances and emotional reinvention, recognized the signs. Her advice was pointed but kind, urging Lucas not to ignore the lingering damage of his past, and not to bury his own grief under obligation or self-sacrifice. She reminded him that healing wasn't something that came from proving yourself to others, but from accepting your own fractured parts without judgment. Lucas didn't say much in response, but Lulu's words stayed with him longer than either of them realized. Meanwhile, Brooklyn was observing a different kind of fracture, the one quietly forming between Chase and Dante. The tension had been building for weeks, but now it was impossible to ignore. Brooke had hoped that whatever disagreements the two men had could be handled privately, like professionals. But what she saw now told a different story. Their silent glances during meetings, the forced politeness, the way Chase would exit a room the moment Dante entered, it was all unraveling. And Brooke, who had worked so hard to keep her own life steady, felt the sting of old patterns resurfacing. She feared this breakdown between two people she cared about would eventually pull her into a storm she'd barely survived the last time. What disturbed her more was the sense that neither man was being entirely honest, not just with each other, but with themselves. And then, there was Marco. The ever-curious, often underestimated figure who always seemed to be in the right place at the wrong time. Marco had been following a lead related to Sidwell's operations, but what he stumbled upon went far beyond what he was looking for. Hidden behind an encrypted server and layers of misdirection, Marco uncovered a digital vault containing files that hinted at something deeply sinister. They weren't just financial transactions or backdoor deals. There were names, medical records, surveillance logs. One file, in particular, made him freeze. It was a video feed, recorded just days ago, showing a clandestine meeting between a masked individual and someone Marco instantly recognized, Natalia. Whatever they were discussing, it was clear it wasn't legal or safe. But more disturbing was the final image, a document signed by a figure Marco couldn't believe was still active in Port Charles. Someone everyone believed had either disappeared or died. And now, they were pulling strings again from the shadows. That discovery shifted Marco's focus entirely. It wasn't just about Sidwell anymore. It wasn't just about Natalia or even Sonny. What Marco had found hinted at a coordinated manipulation of events spanning multiple families and alliances. And if the person he believed was behind it was truly alive, everything about the recent chaos, from the tensions in the Corinthos family to the unease rippling through the hospital, the police department, and even the Quatermain estate, might all be connected to a single, unseen hand. As the week in Port Charles unfolded, none of these revelations felt connected on the surface. Carly's unease, Jason's quiet mentorship, Lulu's emotional clarity, Brooke's rising fears, and Marco's shocking discovery all seemed like isolated ripples. But beneath it all, the water was churning. These weren't separate stories, they were symptoms of a larger reckoning approaching fast. And while the residents of Port Charles continued moving through their daily lives, believing they still held some control over their destinies, the truth was beginning to crystallize. The ground beneath them had already started to shift. And the fall, when it came, would be swift.